Your soulmate screamed their love for you in front of everyone. You won't believe what happened. Open this right now. My beloved child, imagine the one moment your soulmate never expected to happen, the moment their carefully hidden feelings suddenly became impossible to contain, and they said your name in front of everyone. Not quietly. Not through a private message. Not behind a screen where they could delete their words afterward. They stood there surrounded by people, with every eye capable of noticing what happened next, and somehow your name became the center of the room. What they said may have left everyone completely stunned, because this was not the version of their feelings they had shown before. For so long, they may have acted composed, distant, or completely unaffected, while privately carrying emotions they could barely explain. But something happened that finally pushed those hidden feelings into the open. Don't skip, because the shocking part is not simply that they expressed their love, it is what happened immediately after everyone realized exactly who they were talking about. At first, the room may have gone strangely quiet. People who had been talking suddenly stopped. Someone may have looked at them, then looked toward you, trying to understand whether they had heard correctly. Your soulmate may have realized what they had just done, but instead of taking the words back, they may have stood there and allowed the silence to remain. And then came the expression that revealed everything their words could not explain. This was not necessarily some perfectly planned declaration. It may have been an emotional moment that escaped after weeks, months, or even longer of holding everything inside. They may have tried to keep their feelings private, but one question, one conversation, one unexpected situation finally broke through that restraint. Stay till the end, because there is a detail about that public confession that could completely change the way you understand their behavior toward you. Then something happened that nobody in that room was prepared for. Someone asked them directly whether they truly meant what they had just said. Your soulmate had a chance to laugh it away, call it a misunderstanding, or pretend they were only speaking emotionally in the moment. But instead, they looked toward you. And that look may have said more than the entire confession. Suddenly, everyone understood that your name had not slipped into the conversation by accident. You were the person they had been talking about all along. Something huge is waiting for you in this story, because what happened next may have transformed the entire atmosphere, from whispers and surprise into a moment your soulmate could never simply erase from memory. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because the next part reveals the one thing they may have said after everyone realized their confession was really about you. The room had already changed, but your soulmate's next words made everything even more intense. For a few seconds, they may have simply stood there, realizing that everyone was waiting for an explanation. They could have turned the moment into a joke, changed the subject, or stepped away from the attention. Instead, they may have taken a breath and finally said something they had been too hesitant to say privately, that their feelings for you were real, and they were tired of pretending otherwise. Imagine the reaction. Someone who had always seemed careful with their emotions was suddenly speaking openly, with no comfortable way to hide behind vague words anymore. The people around them may have exchanged shocked looks, while your soulmate kept looking toward you as though your reaction was the only one that truly mattered. Don't skip, because this was only the beginning. The most surprising part was not that they admitted their love, it was the reason they finally chose that particular moment to say it. Maybe someone had unknowingly brought up your name during a conversation, asking a simple question about relationships or the future. Your soulmate may have tried to stay quiet at first. But then someone made a remark that touched a sensitive part of their story, and suddenly all the words they had been holding back came rushing forward. They may have said that you were not just another person in their life. They may have explained that they had tried to convince themselves that their feelings would eventually fade, but every attempt to ignore them only made them realize how deeply you mattered. And then came the sentence that made everyone understand the seriousness of the moment. They may have admitted that they had wanted to tell you for a long time, but they were afraid of what would happen once the truth was finally out. Stay till the end, because the next revelation explains what they were actually afraid of, and why they chose to say everything in front of everyone instead of waiting for a private moment. Perhaps the most unexpected part was that your soulmate did not make the confession to impress anyone. They may have been speaking because they finally realized that hiding their feelings had become more painful emotionally than being honest. Someone may have asked, "Why are you saying this now?" And their answer could have revealed everything. Maybe they said they did not want another opportunity to pass while they remained silent. Maybe they realized that people around them had misunderstood their connection with you. Or maybe they simply wanted you to hear the truth directly from them rather than through rumors, assumptions, or someone else's interpretation. And now the room was no longer focused on the confession itself. Everyone was watching you. Your soulmate had opened their heart publicly, and suddenly the entire moment depended on what happened next. Something huge is waiting ahead, because the reaction they saw on your face may have completely changed what they decided to say afterward. Your soulmate saw your reaction, and for a moment, everything else seemed to disappear. The conversations around you became background noise. The people watching were still there, but your soulmate was no longer focused on them. Their attention was fixed on you, trying to understand what your expression meant. Did you believe them? Were you surprised? Were you hurt? Or had some part of you already suspected what they were feeling? This may have been the moment when their confidence began to shake, because saying, "I love you," in front of everyone is one thing, waiting for the person you love to react is something entirely different. They may have suddenly realized that there was no way to control your response. So they waited. And that silence may have felt longer than anything they had experienced before. Don't skip, because what happened during those few seconds may have revealed more about their feelings than the confession itself. Then someone in the room may have tried to break the silence. Perhaps they asked whether your soulmate was serious, or whether everyone had misunderstood the situation. But your soulmate did something unexpected. They repeated your name. Not casually. Not as part of a joke. They said it again with enough certainty that everyone understood the confession was real. And then they may have explained that they had been carrying these feelings quietly because they did not know whether you felt the same way. That one admission could have changed the entire meaning of their previous behavior. The times they seemed distant may suddenly look different. The moments when they watched you but said nothing may make more sense. The conversations they ended too quickly may suddenly seem like moments when they were fighting the urge to reveal too much. Your soulmate may have admitted that they had rehearsed what they wanted to say countless times, but every time they imagined actually telling you, fear of rejection made them retreat. Stay till the end, because the next part reveals the sentence they may have said when someone finally asked why they waited so long. And then came the question that your soulmate may have been secretly asking themselves for a very long time: what if they never knew? That thought may have been more powerful than the fear of embarrassment. They could have continued hiding behind silence, hoping you would somehow understand without them saying anything. But eventually, they may have realized that people cannot read what is never spoken. So they chose honesty. They may have said that they did not want you to spend another day believing that you meant nothing to them. They wanted you to know that behind the calm behavior, there had always been something deeper. And suddenly, the room was no longer witnessing a dramatic confession, it was witnessing someone finally giving a voice to emotions they had protected for far too long. Something huge is waiting ahead, because after hearing all of this, you may expect your soulmate to simply step toward you. But what they did next may have surprised everyone, including you. The confession was already impossible to ignore, but then your soulmate did something nobody expected. instead of rushing toward you, they stopped and gave you space to respond. That small decision may have revealed how seriously they were taking the moment. They had finally said what was inside their heart, but they did not want to force an answer from you simply because everyone was watching. Their eyes may have stayed on you for a few seconds before they quietly admitted that they had imagined this moment many times, just never like this. They had pictured telling you privately, somewhere without an audience, without pressure, without everyone waiting to see what would happen. Yet somehow, their emotions had reached a point where the words escaped in front of everyone. And now they were standing there, vulnerable in a way you may have never seen before. Don't skip, because what they said next may explain why this public confession happened when you least expected it. Someone may have asked them whether they truly wanted everyone to know about their feelings. Your soulmate could have backed away, but instead, they may have answered with surprising calmness. They may have said that they were not trying to create a spectacle or make anyone uncomfortable. They simply wanted to stop hiding something that had become too important to keep pretending about. Then they may have turned toward you and explained that the hardest part had never been loving you, it had been wondering whether you knew. They may have remembered all the times they almost told you, all the messages they typed and never sent, all the conversations where they had an opening but changed the subject. And perhaps the most emotional admission was that they had been waiting for a sign from you while you may have been waiting for honesty from them. Two people could have been standing on opposite sides of the same silence, both wondering what the other truly felt. Stay till the end, because the next moment may finally reveal what happened when your soulmate realized you had heard every word. And this is where the atmosphere could have changed completely. Your soulmate may have looked at you and said that they were not asking you to answer immediately. They only wanted you to know the truth. That one sentence could have taken the pressure out of the room. Suddenly, the confession was no longer about getting an instant response. It was about finally putting something real into words. The people around you may have become silent, giving you both the space to process what had just happened. Your soulmate may have looked nervous, but there could also have been relief in their expression, as though carrying the secret had finally become heavier than revealing it. Something huge is waiting ahead, because after the confession, one person may have stepped forward and said something that nobody expected. And those few words could have completely changed the meaning of everything your soulmate had just revealed. Then someone in the room said something that made your soulmate completely still. It was not a dramatic announcement, but a simple observation that suddenly connected pieces everyone had missed. They may have said, "So this is why you always looked for them whenever they walked into the room." And suddenly, the atmosphere changed again. Your soulmate could no longer hide behind explanations because people were remembering all those tiny moments they had witnessed before. The way their attention shifted whenever you arrived, the way they remembered small details about you, the way they became unusually quiet whenever your name came up. What everyone had once considered coincidence now seemed to have a completely different explanation. Your soulmate may have lowered their eyes for a moment, realizing that perhaps their feelings had never been as invisible as they thought. They had believed they were hiding everything perfectly, but the people around them had apparently noticed pieces of the story long before the confession. Stay till the end, because the next revelation may explain why your soulmate kept trying so hard to conceal what everyone else was already beginning to understand. Someone may then ask the question that finally brings the hidden history into the open: how long have you felt this way? Your soulmate may hesitate, because giving a number would never truly explain how the feelings developed. Perhaps it started with something incredibly ordinary, a conversation where you listened when they needed someone, a moment when you made them laugh without trying, or a time when you showed kindness without expecting anything in return. They may explain that they did not wake up one morning and suddenly decide they loved you. It happened gradually. They noticed themselves thinking about you more often. They remembered your words long after conversations ended. They started caring about how your day was going. And eventually, they realized that what they were feeling had become too meaningful to call ordinary friendship or simple affection. They may have tried to ignore that realization because admitting it would mean accepting that you had become emotionally important to them. But now, standing in front of everyone, there was nowhere left to hide. Then your soulmate may have revealed the part they had never told anyone: they had once seriously considered staying silent forever. Not because they did not care, but because they cared enough to be afraid of losing the connection completely. They may have thought that saying too much could change everything. So they chose the safer path. Quietly loving you from a distance, waiting for some impossible perfect moment when they would somehow know exactly what you felt. But that perfect moment never arrived. Eventually, they realized that waiting forever would leave them with the same unanswered question: what if I had just told them? And perhaps that is why the confession happened publicly. Not because they wanted attention, but because the truth finally escaped the private world where they had kept it locked away. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting ahead, because the next part reveals what your soulmate may have said when someone asked the one question everyone in that room was now thinking: what do you actually want from them? The question finally landed in the room: what do you actually want from them? Your soulmate may have gone completely quiet, because this was different from admitting love. Now they had to explain what that love meant. They could have given an easy answer, something emotional enough to satisfy everyone for a moment, but instead they may have looked directly at you and admitted that they did not want to pressure you into anything. They simply wanted you to know that their feelings were genuine. They wanted the chance to be honest with you, to understand what you felt, and to see whether the two of you could build something real through mutual choice. That answer may have surprised everyone because the confession suddenly became much more mature than anyone expected. It was not about demanding an immediate response. It was about finally removing the uncertainty between you. Stay till the end, because your soulmate's next words may reveal what they were secretly hoping you would understand. Then they may have said something that completely changed the atmosphere. I don't know what they will say, but I know I couldn't keep pretending. Imagine hearing that after all the times you wondered whether their behavior meant anything. Suddenly, the strange pauses, the unfinished conversations, and the moments when they seemed to care more than they admitted could take on a new meaning. Your soulmate may explain that they had spent so much time trying to control their emotions that they eventually forgot how exhausting it was to hide them. They may have watched opportunities disappear because they were waiting for certainty that never came. And now they were standing in front of everyone with one simple truth: they loved you, but they did not know whether you would ever feel safe enough to believe them. That could be why their voice changed when they said your name. It was no longer a hidden thought. It was something they were finally allowing the world to hear. And then came the moment nobody expected. Your soulmate may have admitted that there was one specific memory that made them realize they could not keep silent forever. It might have been a moment when you walked away without knowing what they wanted to say. A conversation that ended before they could finish. A time when you helped them without realizing how deeply it affected them. Or perhaps it was simply the realization that life keeps moving, and someday they might look back and regret never being honest. That memory may have stayed with them until the fear of speaking became smaller than the fear of never speaking at all. Something huge is waiting ahead, because after revealing that memory, your soulmate may have finally turned completely toward you and said the words they had been rehearsing privately for far longer than anyone knew. And what they said next may have left the entire room completely silent. The room became silent when your soulmate finally looked directly at you and said the sentence they had apparently carried for far too long: I never stopped choosing you in my heart. It was not loud, but it did not need to be. Everyone heard it. And perhaps even more importantly, you heard it. Your soulmate may have explained that there were moments when they tried to convince themselves that they could simply move forward, forget the feelings, and treat your connection like something ordinary. But every time they tried, something brought them back to the same realization: you mattered to them in a way they could not simply switch off. Maybe they had hidden it behind jokes, casual conversations, distance, or a calm expression, but none of those things changed what they felt privately. And now, after finally speaking in front of everyone, they may have realized that the secret was no longer theirs alone. Don't skip, because what they revealed immediately afterward may explain why they had been so afraid to say those words directly to you. They may have told everyone that the hardest part was never knowing whether you felt anything similar. They could see their own feelings clearly, but they could not see inside your heart. So they kept looking for clues. They noticed the way you spoke to them, the way you remembered certain details, the way your expression changed during particular conversations. Sometimes they convinced themselves those moments meant something. Other times they told themselves they were imagining everything. That uncertainty may have created a strange emotional distance between you. They wanted to come closer, but they were afraid of assuming too much. They wanted to ask you directly, but they feared that one honest question might change the entire relationship. And perhaps that is why the public confession became so emotional. They finally stopped trying to interpret signs and decided to speak for themselves. They were not asking you to prove anything. They were simply telling you what was true for them. Then your soulmate may have said something even more unexpected: if you don't feel the same, I will respect that. But I needed you to know. That sentence could have changed everything. Because suddenly, the confession was no longer about expectation. It was about truth. Your soulmate may have been willing to stand in front of everyone and become vulnerable without knowing what answer would come back. And perhaps that was the greatest sign of how serious the moment had become. They had spent so long protecting their heart that eventually they realized protecting it was keeping you from knowing what was inside it. Something huge is waiting ahead, because after those words, someone in the room may have noticed your reaction and quietly asked whether you were going to say something. Your soulmate may have turned toward you, waiting, not demanding, not rushing, simply waiting. And what happened during those next few seconds may have become the moment neither of you ever forgot. For the first time, your soulmate had nothing left to hide behind. The room was quiet, everyone was watching, and the confession they had kept private for so long was now sitting between the two of you. They may have looked at you with an expression that was completely different from the confidence they had shown moments earlier. This was vulnerability without a shield. They had said everything they could say, and now they had to live with whatever your response would be. Perhaps you noticed their hands becoming still, their voice becoming softer, or their eyes searching yours for even the smallest indication of what you were feeling. They may have wanted to speak again, but stopped themselves because they had already said enough. For once, they were not trying to control the outcome. They were simply allowing you to decide what their honesty meant to you. Stay till the end, because what happened after that silence may have surprised everyone in the room. Then someone quietly stepped away, giving the two of you a little space even though other people were still nearby. Your soulmate may have taken a breath and told you something they could never say when they were trying to appear strong: they were scared. Not scared of you, but scared of finally knowing the answer to a question they had carried for so long. They may have admitted that uncertainty had become easier than rejection because uncertainty allowed them to keep imagining possibilities. But once they confessed, imagination was no longer enough. They needed reality. They needed to know whether you saw them the way they saw you. And perhaps that is why their public confession was so emotional. They were not simply revealing love. They were surrendering the protection of silence. They were giving you the truth and trusting you to decide what to do with it. And then you may have noticed something unexpected: your soulmate was not asking you to make a grand promise. They may have simply asked for one honest conversation away from everyone else. A chance to sit down, talk without an audience, and finally say everything that could not fit into one emotional moment. That request may have changed the energy completely. The people around you could still feel the significance of what had happened, but the next chapter was no longer meant for them. It belonged to the two of you. Your soulmate may have looked relieved just knowing that the truth was finally out. And perhaps, for the first time, you could understand why their behavior had been so confusing. Something huge is waiting ahead, because that private conversation may reveal the one thing your soulmate could never explain in public. The exact moment when they realized their feelings for you had become far deeper than they ever intended. The private conversation may begin quietly, almost strangely ordinary after everything that just happened. Your soulmate could sit across from you and suddenly realize that the person they had imagined talking to so many times is finally there. No audience. No whispers. No one watching their expression. Just you and them. And perhaps that freedom makes the truth even harder to say. They may look at you and admit that their public confession was never something they planned. They had imagined telling you privately, carefully choosing every word, making sure they sounded composed. But emotions do not always follow plans. Something about that moment made them realize they were tired of hiding behind perfect timing. Then they may tell you the real reason they finally spoke: they had become afraid that you might spend your entire life believing they never truly cared. That possibility was more painful to them than the embarrassment of admitting everything. Don't skip, because what they reveal next may explain why their feelings remained hidden for so long. Your soulmate may then tell you about the moments you never knew mattered. Maybe there was a day when you said something encouraging without realizing how much they needed to hear it. Maybe there was a time you stayed when others would have walked away. Perhaps you remembered something about them that everyone else forgot. Or maybe it was something much smaller, a simple conversation, an ordinary laugh, the way you looked at them when they were speaking. They may explain that those moments slowly changed the way they saw you. They started noticing details. They began caring about your happiness. They wondered what your future would look like and, eventually, found themselves imagining a place for themselves in it. They may have been frightened by that realization because suddenly you were no longer just someone they admired. You had become someone they could genuinely picture building a life beside. And instead of admitting it, they tried to hide it. That is why the confession became so emotional. The feeling did not arrive overnight. It grew quietly while they were pretending it was not happening. Then comes the sentence that may finally connect everything. I didn't tell you because I was afraid that once you knew, everything between us would change. They may admit that they valued the connection so much that even the possibility of losing it made them remain silent. They wanted to be close to you without risking the relationship they already had. But eventually, they realized that silence was changing things too. Every unspoken feeling created another layer of distance. Every missed opportunity became another unanswered question. And now they had finally chosen honesty over uncertainty. Something huge is waiting ahead, because the next moment may reveal whether this confession becomes the beginning of something real, or simply the conversation that finally gives both of you the clarity you have been missing. Stay till the end, because your soulmate may still have one final truth they have never said aloud. There was one sentence your soulmate had deliberately kept out of every conversation until now, because saying it would make everything feel real: I have imagined a future with you. They may have admitted that this was the thought they were most embarrassed to reveal, not because imagining a future with someone is wrong, but because it meant you had reached a place in their heart that they could no longer explain away. They had pictured ordinary things rather than some perfect fantasy. The two of you talking after a long day, supporting each other through difficult decisions, celebrating small victories, building routines, laughing over things nobody else would understand. And perhaps that was when they realized their feelings were not simply about excitement. They were about wanting to know whether something genuine could exist between you. The public confession may have been emotional, but this private admission could be even more significant because it showed what was underneath the emotion: intention. Don't skip, because the next revelation may explain why they had never allowed themselves to tell you this before. They may tell you that they were constantly waiting for a perfect sign that you felt the same way. Every kind message, every long conversation, every moment of closeness could make them hopeful, but then uncertainty would return. They did not want to misread your kindness as romantic interest. They did not want to create expectations you never asked for. So they kept everything locked inside. And perhaps they convinced themselves that loving you quietly was enough. But eventually, they realized that you deserved the truth just as much as they deserved clarity. They may say that they do not know exactly what the future will look like, and they do not want to pretend that one confession can determine it. What they do know is that they want the opportunity to discover it honestly, with you, not through assumptions about you. That could be the moment when everything becomes calmer. The confession is no longer a dramatic secret. It becomes an invitation to have a real conversation about what both of you want. Then your soulmate may finally tell you the one thing they wished they had said from the beginning: I don't need you to answer because everyone is watching. I want your answer when it is just you and me. And suddenly, the entire meaning of that public confession changes. They did not say those words in front of everyone because they wanted to pressure you. They said them because they had spent too long hiding, and for one unexpected moment, honesty became stronger than hesitation. Now they are willing to give you the space to process it. Perhaps they will wait. Perhaps they will ask to speak again later. Perhaps the next chapter begins with something as simple as a quiet conversation where both of you can finally say what you really feel. Something huge is waiting ahead, because the story does not truly end with your soulmate shouting their love in front of everyone. That was only the moment the secret became visible. The real story begins when the audience disappears, the noise fades away, and two people finally have the courage to speak honestly to each other. The room eventually became quiet, but the words your soulmate had spoken were still hanging in the air. Everyone had heard the confession, but only you knew what it felt like to hear those words directed toward you. Your soulmate may have looked at you one final time before admitting something they had never been able to explain. They were not expecting a perfect answer. They simply could not continue pretending that their heart was somewhere else. They may have spent so much time wondering whether the right moment would ever arrive that they finally understood something important: the perfect moment does not always announce itself. Sometimes you create it by choosing honesty when silence would be easier. And perhaps that was exactly what happened. Your soulmate had spent so long waiting for certainty that they nearly forgot that love also requires courage, communication, and the willingness to accept another person's freedom to choose. Stay till the end, because the final revelation is not about what they said in front of everyone. It is about what their confession means after everyone else has gone. When the crowd eventually moved on, your soulmate may have remained close enough to speak with you privately. Their voice could have become softer, completely different from the confidence they showed during the public confession. They may have told you that they had replayed this conversation in their mind countless times. In some versions, you smiled. In others, you walked away. In others, they never found the courage to say anything at all. But reality finally gave them something their imagination never could: the opportunity to be honest with you directly. They may have admitted that they had been carrying feelings they could not properly explain, that they had tried to hide them because they valued your connection, and that eventually they realized hiding was not protecting anything anymore. Then they may have said the words that summarize everything: I don't want to wonder anymore. I want us to be honest about what this is. Not a demand. Not a promise about an unknown future. Just an invitation to stop guessing and start communicating. And perhaps that is the real ending to this story. Your soulmate may have screamed their love in front of everyone, but the most meaningful part may happen afterward, when there is no audience left and neither of you has anything to prove. If their feelings are genuine, they will not need one dramatic moment to convince you. Their actions, consistency, respect, communication, and willingness to understand you will speak much louder over time. And if you ever find yourself in a moment where someone finally tells you what they have been hiding, remember that you are allowed to take your time. You can listen without immediately deciding. You can ask questions. You can be honest about your own feelings. Because real love is not proven by the loudest confession, it is built through two people choosing each other freely, again and again, in the quiet moments nobody else sees. So perhaps the unforgettable part of this story was never the moment your soulmate said your name in front of everyone. It was the moment they finally stopped hiding, looked directly at you, and gave you the truth. What happens after that belongs to both of you, and for the first time, neither of you has to guess what the other person is feeling.